So we have 1.1 million things to buy going on. We went through and talked about, we have that New York City was adding 55,000 units. We got big disruption in 1970s, and then we've never really recovered from that. And we never ever regained ourselves, except in '06, we gained about, we were putting out 33,000 permits that were applied for, whether it was delivered or not there. And I tell you, the market was as hot as ever when we were delivering that much product. So it's not the product, the amount of product, in my opinion, that does. It's about demand. So what impacts demand? That's the piece, in my opinion, to focus on. And that's where one should be looking. And what does that? So about 5, 6, 7 years ago, wow, we're in 2014, so maybe about 8 years ago, I did a study, and we took a look at the real estate residential market as an index in and of itself. And then we compared it to 5 other indexes, okay? 1 was a stock market, 2 was inflation, 3 was interest rates, 4 was maybe in the NASDAQ, and the 5th one was unemployment or employment. Okay? Of all of those indices, that when it went down, did anything happen to the residential marketplace? Nothing, but for one, which was employment. Okay? When unemployment hit, it very quickly started to impact the housing market, both rental and sales. Okay? So the correlation that we figured out is the direct indice to housing, rental or a condo, and they're treated to buy, and we'll go through a little different, was employment. Okay? So then if you look at what impacts employment, and you start to see if something, right, so inflation can or doesn't really, but stock markets do, a lot of other things. So if you start to see what is impacting employment gearing up, and then you know employment or unemployment may be forthcoming, then you can start realizing that maybe the housing market may be interrupted. So it's what to watch for, because I will tell you, I just came from a lecture series in Australia where this professor was talking about it, and he said, we are bombarded with more information than ever before, and he goes, I'm telling you, 99% is irrelevant, don't read it, don't. And it's interesting when you look at the interesting statistic, this one. The average person in 1917, in 1 year's time, gained as much information as is printed every day in the New York Times. Okay? Now, that was just the amount of information flooded into our brain over a year was what's contained in the New York Times today, cover to cover. I will tell you, the New York Times relatively today is insignificant with information compared to what we're bombarded with. It's useless information, mostly. It's interesting, maybe provocative, but useless to what our daily needs are, because the market here doesn't shift like that. Even day traders don't, unless you're momentum trading with lots of spurious information, it's not relevant to what we do. The heart of what we do, what we need to do, in my opinion, is to get rid of the clutter, focus on a couple key things, and get our buyers and sellers to really understand what's important, and to give them comfort that they're not making a mistake, right? And that's all demand, and that's where our attention is. So what happened since let's take 1970, So since 1970, what happened to demand in New York City? Because that, in my opinion, is the critical component, okay? We went through a major upheaval, right, in the 1970s. Unlike anything that I think, God willing, we'll ever see in our lifetime. We lost 768, well, before I go into all the numbers, one other thing I would say, everybody says, look, I'm a believer in looking at patterns, right? And if you can identify the pattern, so if you think on it, if employment is the key to housing, and you look at what the pattern is that impacts employment, then you look at a couple things, see that, and then you have some anticipatory predictability, if you could use that word, that something may happen, right? So the idea is if you can see a repetition of patterns, then you may be able to see how to react to it. And I'll tell you what I figured out, which was correct, and then I'll tell you where it deviated in this last recession, because it was very unique, and how to adjust for those kind of things. So, and everybody will tell you that the patterns don't exist because nobody can determine what the causes are. So what I would say is nobody could tell you what the catalysts are going to be, but when the catalyst hit, the pattern is very repeatable in New York City. And I will go through 4 or 5 of them. They're very similar. They're, bless you, they're very identical, I think. The catalysts are all different, okay? So we're going to go through the recessions. Why the recessions? Because that's when demand is impacted. And in my supposition, demand is what affects the marketplace, not supply. So supply is great to learn about because that's what we got to sell, but we want to know what's impacting our market. So we'll go through demand. So, demand.